let's start on the book. I said we'll give you a quick. I'm going to give you the reasons why I gave the book to read, and number two, I will give you the outline of the book. So, the reason why I ask you to read this book is, number one, because it's one of the best books in apologetics and one of the less read books in apologetics. And the idea being is that many of you noticed when you read the book that you were able actually, in one sentence, get a quote from him and being able to see in one sentence what many people say in one book or, sometimes volumes. I'm sure this would be the kind of book that Pastor Shibeli likes, because he usually says that they could say in one sentence what they are saying in the book. Well, we found one good author for you. He's actually saying in one sentence what many people say in a book. Yeah, we should actually. Yes. So, this is the reason why. Two reasons why I wanted you to read the book. Number one is because we rarely read him, and people who start to read him actually drop the book because of the dense thinking there is behind it, and also because we want I want to learn how to say quickly, an argument, how to phrase an argument quickly. I don't have to spend hours explaining things that can be lengthy and bring people to just wondering, okay, what do you have to say? Just say it. Sometimes we need to be able to do that, having a point, and this is very important. So just to remind you the context of the book, this book follows the other one that is Heretics, was published 2 or 4 years earlier than this one, I don't remember, but the one you read was published in 1908. And the idea was actually to present a positive side to the negative critics that he made in the previous one. And that's the idea of the book, as I said, is to show that Christianity fits humanity. Not that it means that Christianity shrinks to humanity, but the needs of humans are met in the Christian faith. That's the idea of the book. And obviously he says that he doesn't want to prove Christianity to be true as a book, but he does that in chapter 9, thinking that he's making some points, which actually is not its best chapter, but it is a good chapter. So let's go with a few chapters. Chapter 1, the introductions. The idea is to show a paradox in man. Number one, man wants discovery and security in the same time. And that's the idea of the sailor, that goes around the world and actually goes back to Brighton and discover England. And the idea is that what he found in his life, like he's for the adventure, but in the same time, if I can have adventure with security, this is what men would really want. And this is exactly what he found in Christ. We have an adventurous life. It's beyond reason. It's beyond the shrinking life that materialist thinkers would put us into. But in the same time, it's adventurous, but in the same time, it's security. It's security for this life, but security for the other life also. And that's the reason, that's how he introduces the book. And the idea being is, this is why I want to say, okay? And he will finish his argument in chapter 8. This is why it's hard to find the thread of the book, because in chapter 1, he says something that he will actually finish in chapter 8. So, in chapter 2, the book, The Maniac, is actually saying that the maniac believes in himself. I don't remember who said, I'm trying to find who said, yes, Pastor Tero spoke about self-confidence that man has. And if you remember, at some point, Chesterton says in the book that those who believe in themselves are in asylums. They are in institutions. Those who really believe themselves become crazy. That's the idea. And this is why he says that, the maniac, he's the one that believes in himself. The maniac, the crazy, the madman, is actually the unbeliever that thinks he got it, but he has not got it because he believes in himself, and he builds himself a shrinked reality. And in that chapter, you have the quote that we had this morning, the madman lost everything but his reason. Meaning that a fool is not somebody who lost his reason. A fool, according to the Bible, is the one that has his reason, but reason against God, which is foolishness. Because we know that creates, a paradox in the mind. On the one hand, I live in natural revelation, according to Romans 1. Paul is saying that the nature is clear, the creation is clear enough. We know the divine power and God. We know that God is eternal, chapter 1. We also know that man suppresses the truth. And that suppression of truth is actually the idea of the maniac, all right, as we said earlier. Chapter 3, the suicide of the thought. And there is a quote I want to read, and I think I gave it to you on your paper because I'm going to use it for the class Friday night. But this is what quote 64, the last one. He says, just as one generation could prevent the very existence of the next generations by all entering a monastery or jumping into the sea, so one set of thinkers can in some degree prevent further thinking by teaching the next generation that there is no validity in any human thought. It is idle to talk away. Well, I'm not going to read that. It says at the end, the reason is a matter of faith, but I will talk about that later. The idea being is that the suicide of the thought is not Christianity. People are saying, remember what we said this morning about the debate between faith and reason? The world is saying, well, we have reason, and reason and you have faith, meaning you and I are opposite. And we said something different this morning. No, you have a kind of reason, and we have a different kind of reason. My reason is God exists, so miracles are possible. Makes sense, right? And that's a different kind of reasoning. But actually, what the point is saying that the real suicide of the thought comes when you are saying that nothing is meaningful. So the idea being, and this is what he says, that a set of thinkers, and he's actually thinking about the materialist, and he's saying there is a set of thinkers in some degree prevent further thinking by teaching the next generation that there is no validity in any human thought. And this is a reality of people saying there is no absolute truth. Well, if there is no absolute truth, and if there is no meaning in life, then why should we think? And then if there is no meaning in life, remember what we said about I don't understand how people can be thinking that absolute truth does not exist in the same time being professor in a university. Well, if you are thinking that there is no absolute truth, why do you teach? Because what you're teaching actually is meaningless because there is no absolute truth. And even further than that, I don't understand anyone who thinks that there is no absolute truth and at the same time willing to debate for some kind of a truth. And even debating the idea that there is no absolute truth is meaningless, because if it is meaningless and that there is no absolute truth, then you should not be able to defend it. So that is the suicide of the thought. So he's progressing little by little. In chapter 4, that's the funniest chapter, he says in the Ethics of Elfland, the world is magic, and it does not explain itself. That's the idea of the chapter. There has to be, and he says in the book, I have always felt life first as a story, and if there is a story, there is a storyteller. Simple. The world is magic, in quote unquote, it does not explain itself. Chapter 5, the flag of the world, that's the title of the chapter, and he actually says, man belongs here because there is a plan. And this is, Pastor Jeffrey spoke about the optimist and the pessimist. This is where you find it in the chapter, and you spoke about the optimist being the true patriot. Meaning that if I understand what the world is, then I understand I'm here for a reason. So the flag of the world is actually this world. I belong to the world, and the world belongs to me. We can have, there is some kind of, I don't know the English word, but there is a relationship, let's put it this way. There is some kind of intelligibility. I can understand the world around me, and there is a reason for that. I belong here. I mean, what it means by that, we've been created in the world. We don't belong here ultimately. But this is the idea of chapter 5. Chapter 6 and chapter 7 are actually two chapters that go together. And he actually spent these two chapters showing the paradox of Christianity. And paradox are essential, for the truth of Christianity. Why? Because if you and I can explain everything about God, that means that we made him. Meaning by that, if you and I can understand everything about who God is, it's a finite God. There has to be some things I don't understand. This is why Paul speaks extensively in his letters about mysteries. There has to be mysteries. If God is God, then there has to be things I don't understand. And that is very important. And in those 2 chapters, he also speaks about the paradox that brought contradictory arguments against Christianity. You remember what we said about that? I think you brought up the question this morning. And then we spoke about, what did we speak about? Let me remember. I'm losing my mind. Which is why I'm not a fool, because the fool loses everything but his mind. So, well, I don't remember. But yes, the idea is that one thing that brought him to Christ was reading atheist books that were actually saying one thing, and its opposite. It comes back to me. It's like, Christians are not interested in the world, so they are not involved in environment. And some other critics are saying, well, Christians are too much involved in the world. This is why they have wars. Well, it's either way. Either we are too much involved or we're not enough involved in the world. Cannot be both. And he brings up those paradoxes as being, number one, a proof that we have the truth, because it has to be beyond finite mind. And number two, it brings contradictory critics for those who don't understand the paradox of Christianity. And chapter 8 is maybe the most important chapter. It completes the argument started in chapter 1. That's the title is the Romance of Orthodoxy. And the point that he's making is that, because in his book he's addressing materialism and atheism, but he's also very much addressing liberal theology. And the reason why he's against those, I don't refer, I'm going to try to find, no, I don't have it here, but at some point he's making a case against liberal theology by saying, I don't remember the quote. I need to find it, but that's very interesting. But the point being is that for Christian theology, what makes sense in this world is that if the cardinal doctrines are kept intact, then the world makes sense. And this is why he calls it the romance of orthodoxy. If we keep intact the idea of the original sin in Genesis 3, then we have an explanation for the mess in the world. If we actually try to make it not reality, then we don't have an explanation for evil in the world. So the idea of the chapter 8 is actually making a final statement by saying, well, if we don't change the doctrines, then we will explain the world the way it is, we will have an explanation, and they will give man a proper expectation for real progress in the future, because there is redemption. So that's the point. And the last chapter, as I said, is not the best chapter, but he brings up some points to explain what he believes to be arguments for Christianity. So this is how I would maybe sum up the thread of the book. And as you can say, maybe the thread is not the best word because it's not a real thread. It's just chapter by chapter explanations. So do you have any questions or comments on that? Are we okay in this? Are we ready to move? According to, well, he said it himself in the book at the beginning. What he means by orthodoxy, he says it's the creed of the apostles. If you believe in that, then you're an Orthodox Christians. If you believe in the creed of the apostles, then that's what he says. The Apostles' Creed should be what he understands as being orthodoxy. He said that in the beginning of the book.
You gave two reasons for the book. Like one was one of the best of these great books of apologetics. What was the other reason?
The other reason for the book was to give us an example of how we can actually say in a nutshell some very strong arguments. Because if you think about this, I don't know how many, and the idea is, when I thought about this, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to read the book again, get as many quotes as I can, and you will see on your quote you have 64, and I think out of the 64, maybe 50 are from Chesterton's books of orthodoxy. So you can beat the whole course of apologetics just with this one book. It's how much he had great quotes. You remember we said about the madman yesterday, or was it this morning? This morning. And many of the defining of what foolishness is according to the Bible is found in the book of Chesterton, with the homogeneity, I think it was yesterday night, and then the contracted common sense, and the roots and the reason without roots and reasoning in void. All this comes from the understanding that he has of the maniac, as we said. So the madman being the unbeliever. Anybody else?
Do you want to use the book for some homework later on?
No. I mean, for those who register late, yes, there will be assignment for the book because you were not able to do the pre-course work. But for those who are able to read the book, then you won't have to do this. Any other questions or comments? We're going to start a whole new era. So we need, yes.
I found a copy that has both heretics and orthodoxy in it. If you're interested, I recommend reading heretics. It was actually when I got reading orthodoxy, and then actually I went back and read a lot of heretics and it helped me kind of put things into.
Yes, they both go together. And it reminds me of something that there is two books that you can read from him if you want to go deeper in discovering him. One is Heretics and the other one is The Everlasting Man. And for those who know C.S. Lewis' history, you know that C.S. Lewis got saved when he read The Everlasting Man. I mean, he got saved. He was convinced of truth of Christianity when he read The Everlasting Man. People say that is his masterpiece. So I think orthodoxy is, but... So just one thing about this is, as we said, he's a Catholic, so there is many things that we don't agree with. Obviously. But this is why we need critical thinking. But many of the things that he said and published was when he was a Christian and not a Catholic. Because I think he was Catholic because he wanted to provoke people.
Just as we before we leave this subject, I am just very, very impressed by the fact that he's doing this powerful apologetics on this realm, on the realm of the humanness, the humanity of the man. This is a very, very, just like having years ago, read Josh McDowell and reading Norman Geisler and reading whatnot. There's a certain expectation that the best argument for proving something is something very complicated, and there's a lot of facts, and there are a lot of evidences, and there's a lot of that, and in all simplicity, finding out that actually, whether you are a very intellectual or whether you are very unlearned and very simple person, there's this common ground of humanity and this simple relationship, like how I stand in this world and before God, and how things make sense. It's kind of fascinating. It's like opening up the power of that kind of thinking and power of that kind of argumentation, and I think it's easy to overlook it.
Yes.
And that's why I'm very thankful that you gave this book as a pre-course work, because it's something that, of course, we like reading some C.S. Lewis's books, perhaps, and so on. But here's a very comprehensive argumentation in a relatively short volume, and as you said, about this other book, how it affected C.S. Lewis and probably many other people. It's very interesting.
Yes. And actually, at the beginning, I hesitated to give the book, and the one reason is because I think because he's British, it would be too much of a building up Pastor Simon. I was thinking I need to find somebody who is not British, but I had to give him because, so I didn't want to, but I had to. Okay. All right. Where is it? Where are we? Okay, so we're going to start something totally new. So we'll see how it goes, because Pastor Charles is supposed to join us maybe around 7:30 or so, and I asked him if he wanted to share something else, so he will be sharing something else later. So when he comes, then I might split, because this class actually I won't be able to finish tonight. It would be too much material to cover in 2 hours, even less, if he comes and wants to share tonight, which I asked him to, and then he was willing to come again, so that's great. I think he did great this morning by showing that, the spiritual principles and the apologetic principles, how they go together. It was very amazing. So let's think about where we are. So what we've learned so far, and maybe I need to back up a little bit. I want to do this, is that, is it this one? Yes, it's the one. Remember what we learned? This is, no. Okay. This is what we said. When we summed up what apologetic is all about, this is what we said yesterday. And now we are done with the foundations of what should be in a biblical apologetics. And we summed up what we said yesterday with those 4 points. Number one, we need a coherent apologetics, meaning that apologetics needs to include the biblical doctrines. And that seems to be obvious to us because we love the Bible and we love theology. But many apologetics don't include biblical teaching, which is, to me, is very amazing. And most people don't even know, as I said yesterday, that what we call classical apologetics and very much of the 5 ways of Thomas Aquinas was developed. And what we know, like if you read Norman Geisler, he's very much a Thomas Aquinas fan. And Thomas Aquinas was a great thinker, but he was influenced by Greek philosophy very much. And number 2, he didn't think that there was total depravity. He thought that man could reason his way up to God, to put it simply. Now, if you think this and you develop an apologetics, then you are going to found and base your apologetics on thinking that reason can do the job. We all know that reason cannot do the job. Reason can take you so far. You can understand arguments, but as we said earlier, we need to also to think about the presuppositions behind reason. So we need to think about this. So if I want to do apologetics in the biblical way, I need to remember that man is totally depraved. And I should not think that laying evidence in front of an unbiased reason will do the job, because there is no such thing as an unbiased reason. Again, if Romans 1:18 is true, man suppress the truth. So what I'm interested in, it's not to show that God exists. It is to preach the gospel, and at the same time to show that the man says there is no God because he suppresses the knowledge that he has of God. That is a very different approach. So we have to be coherent. Number 2, we have to be rational, meaning that we have to be prepared and trained. We need to have some arguments. And again, I'm not saying that you need to be an expert in apologetics. We said with 1 Peter 3:15 that actually everyone can be an apologist. Why? Because according to 1 Peter 3:15, you need to be ready to give a defense for the hope that is in you, meaning that people see a hope in us. And that hope that is seen in us triggers the questions, and we answer with an apologia in Greek, which means that we are answering with apologetics. But what triggers the questions is not the intellectual argument, it's the life that we have. 1 Peter 3, the context is, remember, is persecution and suffering. And if it's the case, then we stand out because we have a hope. And that hope makes us live differently. And that hope actually triggers the questions, and we need to answer with an account, which is the word logos, which brings us back to the use of the word, obviously. Number 3, we need to have a defensive apologetics, meaning that I need to be ready to answer legitimate questions. If I preach the gospel, there are some legitimate questions. And when I say legitimate, I need not elaborate on that. But what I mean by that, some questions are not legitimate. Some questions are asked just to put you to the tests. Now, it's up to you, when you're led by the Holy Spirit, to decide whether or not you still want to answer a non-legitimate questions. That is up to you and God. But some questions are legitimate. And I feel the liberty, as I said earlier about Chesterton, I think we need to give him the liberty. Well, he took it anyway, and he's dead now. It's too late to say he should have done it differently. But if I need to have the liberty of the tone I'm going to use, but I need also to have the liberty to say, yes, I will answer, or no, I won't answer. Because if the question is just provocative, then if you just want to debate, the best question to ask sometimes when you sense that the question is actually a provocation is, okay, if I give you a correct, valid, and sound answer and arguments, can we move on and go back to the preaching of the gospel? I don't know about that. Then maybe the guy is not ready. Again, as Christians, we are not salespeople. I'm not selling the gospel. I'm not getting reward for what I'm doing. Actually, I'm just obeying God. This is it. And if I am obeying God by going into the street and preaching the gospel, I should obey God also in the way I do it. Simply, right? Number 3, so we need to have a defensive approach, which is we need to be ready to answer legitimate questions because there might be obstacles that will prevent me to continue the preaching of the gospel. So I need to be ready to do that. And number 4, I need some offensive approach. And when I mean offensive, I don't know if it's the right word in English, actually. Maybe you can help me find another one. But the idea is not to be offending people, but it's to be contending. Challenging would be maybe the best. Confrontational? Aggressive? I don't know. I'd say in French we have the same. Assertive? I'm going to put that out. Offensive is fine? Are you sure? Well, actually, the idea. Maybe you can find your own word, but the idea being it's challenging. Let's put it, let's put it a challenging apologetics. So we need to show the unbeliever the irrational basis of a godless worldview, meaning that if you don't believe in God, that has some consequences, right? Not only the fact that if you don't believe in theology, you go to hell, but even without any theological questions in philosophy, you are in big trouble if you don't believe in God. And this is what we are going to start about tonight. So, and what I will do is tonight and tomorrow, we're going to speak about addressing atheism. And we're going to do it with a double argument. And we will start with, where is it? Oops. Okay. Oops. Voila. Okay. So now we're going to address atheism. How can we address atheism? And we're going to do it in 2 ways. We're first going to have the offensive approach, and then we will have the defensive approach. And now what we are starting to do is actually we are going to address 3 main questions from now until the end of the week. And I'm not counting the science nights because that will be a different issue. But for tonight, tomorrow morning, and the next 2 mornings, we will address the 3 questions. Number 1, the existence of God. Number 2, God and evil. And number 3, miracles. Because they are very interesting to talk about because they actually are very much questions that people ask. And also, they will help us apply some of the principles we said earlier. So I think you will be surprised sometimes, and I know that because we already had some discussion with some of you, and you were looking at me and saying, okay, is that your argument? Is that your answer? Are you sure that people will hear the arguments? And I'm doing this in a provocative way also, because I think sometimes we are trapped in thinking that it's okay for the unbeliever to set the rules of the discussion without challenging the rules of the discussions. And I don't believe we should be doing that. Remember when we said in 1 Corinthians 1, chapter 1, verse 22 and 23, the Jews are looking for miracle signs, and the Greeks are asking for wisdom, but we preach Christ. The idea being is what they want is, okay, I will believe as a Jew if you give me miracle signs. I will believe as a Greek if you give me the wisdom, but I won't give you signs and I won't give you wisdom. I will preach you Christ. Meaning that I will set the rules of the discussions, not because I want to be doing the monologue, but because I'm preaching to you. And again, you're thinking, well, this is not very, it won't work in a debate, setting. Maybe it won't, but again, I said it several times, I would not be involved in a debate. And I don't think that evangelism should be a debate. If you enter in the endless debate, maybe it's time to move on and pray, and before it gets ugly. Actually, maybe sometimes it could. So what we want to do is we want to address the three themes. Number one, the existence of God. And I'm going to use that to show you the offensive and defensive approach and how it works. And then we speak about God and evil. And I will also use that to show how we can use the Bible to answer in apologetics. People sometimes are afraid to use the Bible to answer in apologetics because we're thinking, well, apologetics and evangelism are two different things. Again, I don't believe that apologetics and evangelism should be two different things. I think evangelism should be in charge and apologetics should be the backup if there is any questions. Again. So the arguments are very important. I really strongly believe that we need evidence and arguments, and we will show that in the next couple of days. But at the same time, what I need to do is, again, if you ask me the question, how can you as a Christian believe in an all-good God, all-powerful God, and still you see evil in the world, how do you reconcile that? Okay, so you are asking me to give you a biblical answer because you are asking me as a Christian, can I conceive that? Well, I'm going to give it to you. And my answer will be biblical. Well, I don't believe the Bible. Then don't ask me how I think as a Christian. But I cannot answer otherwise or in other way but as a Christian because that's what I am. And that's really what you want to know. It's how somebody can believe in the all-powerful and all-good God and still see evil and think this is compatible. Well, I will give you a Christian answer and I will give you a biblical answer. And there is many, I think, I'm just going to parentheses on the question of the argument from evil. People say, and you would find that in some apologetic books, people say that this is maybe the strongest argument against Christianity. I don't think this is the strongest argument. I think this is the most emotional argument, which is strong. But this is not the strongest argument against Christianity. And the difficulty to address that is very much the idea of the emotions. So why should I answer an emotional argument with philosophical answers? I think I should answer an emotional argument with facts from the Bible, because if Asaph was relieved in chapter 73, when he entered into the house of the Lord, and he understood the way of the wicked, so evil, then I should be relieved too, and the unbelievers should be relieved too at some point. So why should I prevent him to give him the solution if I'm trying to be philosophizing? I need to be careful with that. And some people don't agree and thinking we should be addressing the issue on a philosophical ground. This is not what the non-believer is asking you. The unbeliever is asking you as a Christian can reconcile both. And we will answer with a biblical answer. That's very important. So we will use that to show how we can do this with the Bible. I don't have to use philosophy all the time. I can use the Bible. It's okay. I am a Christian. I have the right to use the Bible when I answer in apologetics. Number 3, we will speak about miracles, and the idea being that there is some other ways to believe in miracles than just thinking that this is a violation of natural laws. And people think miracles are not possible because they violate the natural laws. And this is obviously not an argument, but we'll talk about David Hume that we mentioned earlier. And we will use that chapter or that course on miracles to show how we can actually challenge empiricism and challenge the unbeliever by showing him that his case against miracles does not stand in the scrutiny. Okay? Is there any question? Yes, Ramir. The 3 points we're going to address: the existence of God, God and evil, and the miracles. Okay, so what we want to do is address the theism, as we said, and we're going to do it in 2 ways. Let's put it a challenging approach. and a defensive approach. What we mean by that is the challenging approach is the 2 Corinthians 5 approach. Casting down imaginations and bringing every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. I want to challenge those vain imaginations. I need to challenge them. Because remember we said about having our thought captive. Well, if apologetics is about bringing every thought captive, and mine needs to be captive too. But how can I bring every thought captive to the obedience of Christ? Well, he answers the questions in the beginning of verse 5. He's actually saying that we are going to cast down those imaginations. So to do that, I need to challenge. Remember what we said also about the homogeneity of the thinking of the unbeliever in his madness. Foolishness is not stupidity. Foolishness is thinking that God does not exist, though I know he exists, because of natural revelation. That's foolishness. And the issue is ethical. I decide to not believe in God because it's better for me right now. So the issue, again, is ethical. And the defensive approach is we will address some argument to present the positive side of why we think there is necessity for God. So God is necessary. And that will be the defensive approach. And I will bring up some arguments that you know, because I think we need to talk about them. But they are not my favorite arguments, but they have to be addressed in the apologetical class. It's mandatory. So when you think about this is how I think is the best way to approach atheism. This is what we'll do. And here is obviously 1 Peter 3:15 in the defensive approach, meaning that I need to be ready to give an answer for the hope that is in me. I need to give an explanation. And actually, when you think about this, the book of Orthodoxy by Chesterton is exactly that. He's explaining why, he's a Christian. Because it fits exactly what I was looking for. And it's amazing. Are we okay with this? Okay, let's go. Where is my other thing here? Here it is. Okay, in Deuteronomy 32:31, this is what we have in the Bible. And it says, for their rock is not like our rock, as even our enemy concede. And the idea here is that what we want to show the unbeliever is that the foundation we have is not the foundation you have. The reason why I believe in God is obviously because he exists, but it also because it makes sense. It makes sense in many ways, and the idea being is that I want to show the unbeliever he has no ground to think the way you think. That's my goal. That is my challenging approach. That is my casting vain imagination approach. Okay, that is the idea. I need to show him that the rock I'm on is not the rock you're on. For their rock is not like our rock, right? And even our enemies concede, meaning that my hope is that will happen to them. The enemies, so to speak, will concede also. That's my goal, right? This is what I want to do. So let's go back. Let's back up a little bit. We spoke about atheism. I don't want to go to the whole history. We did that already this morning, so we don't want to do that. But I think we need to have a relevant apologetics when it comes down to atheism. People are saying, yeah, it's very much in the West. I don't think atheism is very, spreading anywhere else. And that's true. And we said this morning that actually, I don't know if it's a true figure, but some say that there is 4 or 5% of atheists in the world. But the issue is that if we don't address it right now, it will be growing a lot. And some people are saying, atheism does not spread in some areas of the world. Like we don't have as much atheism in Africa. We don't have as much atheism in India, obviously, because there is so many other beliefs. But don't we agree that in Africa, as in India, education is more common than it used to be? So now more people going to university and more people will hear what we hear in university, is that there is no God. So atheism is actually, the future of atheism seems to be brighter and brighter. So we need to know how to address that. This is what we want to do. So the idea is that we need to do those two things, casting down imaginations. I want to read again 2 Corinthians 10:5. I think I have it here. Casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God. Don't you think this is exactly the definition of atheism? It is. And bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. This is what we want to do. And we want to show the atheism that it lacks a sure foundation. This is what I want to do. And we go back to the verse here in Deuteronomy. My goal is actually to show you that you're thinking you have a strong foundation, but you are actually on sinking sand. And I need to be able to show that. And I need to show that with some arguments. This is what we want to do. So, there is 4 implications of atheism that I want to address tonight and tomorrow. Number 1, without God, life is only matter, meaning there is nothing immaterial. We are just molecules, and whatever science defines what we are, but actually we are matter and energy and motion, but we are not much more than that. So those 4 things we want to address is the things that we need to bring up to the attention of the unbeliever, because he needs to know what he doesn't realize, actually. I've never met, maybe you did, I've never met an atheist who realized that he was thinking something that implied those four things. I never met one. Most of the atheists, quote unquote, that I meet, they are not atheists because they decided. They are atheists because we say by default. I don't know if you met some people who actually decided to be atheists after long thinking. We know some people, obviously, because we read their books. I mean, we see them. We don't read the books, but we hear them, voice their opinion, like Dawkins and some of the guys. But it's rare to find somebody who actually look at you in the eyes. You know what? I thought it through, and I have good reason to think to be an atheist. And many times when you start with those people, they say, I am an atheist, and actually asking the questions, because again, as we said earlier, we need to understand where people are at to actually address the exact problems that they are facing in their beliefs. So if you want to understand what an atheist is, you need to ask him what he means by that. I mean, what do you mean? Are you sure that there is no God, or you don't know that there is a God? Most people, usually, they would say they don't know there is a God. So then you're not an atheist. You're an agnostic. It's different. Or I don't think I can know one day. And then you're a skeptic. It's different. Or I believe that everybody actually should have a right to see whatever he wants. Then you're a relativist. But you're not an atheist. So you need to explain, and you need to have that very clear in your mind, because that would be too bad. Let's say, I meet a Muslim in the street, and I don't ask him anything, and here I am with my cosmological argument, and say, this God, there has to be a God, because he looks at you and thinks, I am Muslim, I believe there is a God. Oh, okay, well, I spent 30 minutes explaining to you that there has to be a God, and you already believe. Now, the issue is somewhere else. So if I find the guy is a Muslim, then I can address his specific questions, obviously. So obviously, we have to be aware of that. So there are 4 things that I found that are very effective to discuss with atheists. I'm not saying they are conclusive, because, they are conclusive because they have to be. If truth is always conclusive. But if people don't want to hear it, they won't hear it, obviously. So number 1, if there is no God, then we are left with materialism. Materialism is not, what we're talking about, like having things. Right? I'm not talking about having a house or cars or whatever. Materialism is that we believe there is nothing beyond matter. That's something different. Then we have number 2, we have no explanation for reason. The idea being is that if we evolved for 3.5 billions of years of randomness, how come after all those billions of years of randomness did we come up with a reason that is the opposite of randomness, but order? How can you explain that? And on top of that, how can you explain the existence of reason, and how can you explain the reliability of reason? Because if you are arguing against me, you are thinking that your reason is reliable. So you need to explain to me how that works. Number 3, obviously, if there is no God, there is no meaning for life. We don't come from anywhere, and we are not going anywhere. So if you don't know where you're coming from, and you don't know where you're going, then there is no meaning in life. And then we will expand that, because beyond the fact that there is no meaning, there is no hope either. And creating a meaning, as we said about existentialism earlier, does not, it's just begging the questions by saying, okay, our life doesn't have any meaning, I'm going to create one. Yes, but the deeper question is, why is man craving for meaning? It's not because I need to create one that actually answers the question. It's why should I need one? If I am fit to the world because I evolved, why don't I fit with the world? That's the question we're asking. Number 4, we have no explanation, and also we have no ground for ethics. What I mean by that is, if there is no God, it's just you and I. There's nobody above us. Now, okay, you and I are a society. Who decides what's right and what's wrong? Everybody's going to voice an opinion, because everybody would love to have a right and wrong that actually fits my preferences. Now, who will decide? Give me an answer. What do you think will decide? If there is nobody above us, there is no chief. We are just, I'm not here. Who will decide? The guy with the biggest stick. Yes. That would be Pastor Shibeli. He always has his stick with him. Do you now or you don't? Okay. So, no, seriously, who has the right to tell the others, okay, guys, I found the great compromise. This is what we're going to do. This is a list of good things. This is the list of bad things. All right, everybody go with the program. Hey, wait a minute. Who are you? Who are you to tell that you are going to be in charge of the ethics? Well, I'm just thought, are you thinking you're brighter than us? I'm going to beat you up. No, you should not do that. You should not beat me up. Because it's bad. Who said it's bad to beat you up? Again, you're imposing your ethics. So you see the problem. Ula, you want to say something? You won't? Okay. Can you reply, it's unacceptable. Okay. So, the idea is that if there is no transcendent God above us, then we're left with just us. Now, who decides what is good and bad? And who decides how we're going to impose it? Our people are saying, yeah, I think the majority should vote. So the majority is right. Oh, yes, the majority is right. Now, if the majority decide to persecute the minority, is it good? Well, no, it's bad. But the majority is right, always. Well, that's not what I meant. See, it's that we have a problem with two things. Number one, the universality of ethics means that it needs to apply to everyone. And number two, the legitimacy of ethics. Is it legitimate that I accept the ethics? If there is no God, then we have ethics in the world. We have actually laws. But we do have because we believe in God without believing in God. Meaning that we believe there is a right and wrong somewhere that is ultimate, that we have to agree with. But actually, we don't believe in God. So we believe, as we said earlier, on a borrowed capital. We believe that actually this world functions on a Christian base, and actually on a religious base, without thinking that we are religious. But we have to have the idea of God to make sense of the world. So that's the 4 points we want to make tonight. Is there any questions or comments before I start? Pastor Shibeli.
A little extreme, but
Can you give him the microphone?
Oh, really? So, yeah, please don't. I worked with a man who was an absolute convinced atheist, had been very educated and whatnot. We worked in a prison for murderers. And I would preach the gospel, have Bible study, and he would try to undermine everything I did because he was an atheist. There is no God. There's no existence of God. There's no right and wrong. So one night I was praying. The Holy Spirit gave me an idea how to kind of combat him in a personal way. So I said, there's no right and wrong. He said, yes. I said, there's no sin then. He goes, there's no such thing as sin. So I put the barrel of a gun to his head, and I pulled the hammer back. And I said, I don't like long-haired people. That's my right. There's no right and wrong. And the person with long hair and with these hippie kind of values, I just feel like I think I'm going to shoot you. And he started screaming, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. After he started to read the Bible. And he never, ever tried to undermine again, which I thought was interesting, I just took it to his conclusion, though,
Yes.
Like you're saying, it's perfect. There's no good and there's no evil. There's no sin, right? There's no God, so there's no sin. So it's not wrong for me to shoot you.
Yes.
Because I don't particularly like the kind of lifestyle you live. And if you take these things to their conclusion, it's really quite incredible.
Yes.
It's quite incredibly absurd,
Yes.
you know? So,
So we're trying to define the right word for offensive. I think that would be the offending apologetics. Just, okay, you really want to have it? And actually, well, this is quite a strong argument. Now, do we recommend the same argument for everyone? I think it applies. It's good for Pastor Shibeli. I think he was. Well, I guess he did. Yes. Yeah, it's actually, you have two kinds of people. Let's talk about ethics a little bit. You have two kinds of people. People who say that there is ethics, but they don't know why they have ethics. They don't have any way to explain it. And people who believe there is no ethics, and actually there is ethics, because when you do something like this, or when you slap in the face, or when you say something, or when you ask something, because sometimes that could be offensive, obviously, to slap somebody in the face or to pull a gun on somebody's head. But asking a question is, sometimes I like to ask a question, do you think, out of the 7 billion people there is on Earth now, right now, do you think there is anyone that is doing something that you would consider wrong? Well, there has to be. So there has to be some kind of right and wrong. Even you think, it's nice. We have a saying in France that, I don't know if I told you the joke before. I think I did. There is a minister of labor, English. You will win again. You know this one because I told you this one. The British Minister of Labor and the French Minister of Labor meet one day for a meeting. And the British Minister of Labor explains what he did. We did this and this, we did that. We had this law, this, and then it's actually amazing because it worked. We had so many. The employment went from that much to that much, and it worked perfectly. And then the French, and this is, I think, explaining how the atheist thinks sometimes. The French guy is asking, you need to understand the point. Is that, well, I understand that works practically, but that is work in theory. Meaning that, what the philosophers care today is not, I don't care if it works really, I want to know if it's a good theory. People don't realize that all these things we are discussing actually are things that it's okay to be an atheist as long as you don't think about it. When you think about what it means to be an atheist, then you enter into some problems. This is what we want to show because, again, remember what we said about Romans 1:18. The issue is suppressing the truth. So if I want a head-on collision, in a sense, what we call in our ministry confrontation evangelism, if I want to do that and if I want to succeed, I cannot stop by just presenting the gospel and let him, roll, like water on the back of a duck. I need to have something that is going to be, and we said this morning and yesterday that what actually works in people's heart is the preaching of the cross. 1 Corinthians 1:18, the preaching of the cross is foolishness for those who perish, but for us, it is the power of God. So we need to have that preaching of the cross, but now I need to find a way to show him, as he argues against the preaching I'm presenting, I need to show him that he's actually suppressing the truth. And how can I do that? So what I'm going to show him that he believes in his theory that everything is fine, everything is okay, I got it. And as I said, I was shocked these past 8 months when I go into the street in Baltimore, how many people tell us in Northeast Market, I'm good, I'm good, I'm okay, I'm fine. No, you're not. If you give me 5 minutes, I will show you that you're not doing good, you're not okay, you're not fine. And this is what we want to do. We want to have this kind of provocation, that's kind of challenging approach, showing them, okay, if you don't believe there is a God, then you're left with those 4 items that are very problematic, right? If we are matter, then we are nothing but matter, then we are problem, reason, life, meaning of life, and ethics. Is there any questions before I start? I think what we want to do is maybe go until 8, or should we do that? Because I think you need another break. I see some of you are. So should we have a break now and then I start? Okay, let's do that. We're going to have a break, like 12 minutes, and we come back at 7:40, and then we're going to shoot until 9. All right, thank you.